Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Carla Gericke Show. It's my great pleasure to be beaming into your homes and live on Facebook and everywhere where social media is available. This week, I'm going to be talking to two of my favorite people, and I will introduce them in a moment. I also realized that I have a lot of favorite people because I keep saying that in the intros, but it's true. I love my friends because my friends are awesome. Here at the Carla Gericke Show, of course, we like to talk about the art of independence. And last night we had a new movers party that is for free staters, so people from other parts of the country who are choosing New Hampshire as their forever home. They're choosing New Hampshire because it is, frankly, the freest place in America and possibly the world. And I'm not just making wild claims. I have proof. The Cato Institute this week came out with their free, I think it's called the Freedom Index, and New Hampshire is number one. We're number one because as a state, we value freedom. And my two guests today from Bardo Farm, they're a husband and wife team, but they don't always agree on everything. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to film 2 episodes. We're all going to have a conversation, and what we'll be talking about today is school choice in New Hampshire. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome both Ian Underwood and Jody Underwood to the Carla Gericke Show.
Thanks for having us, Carla.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for driving down. So I think just to start, why don't, okay, I'll do a little introduction, but then you guys can do more formal ones. So Jody and Ian, I met way back in, I think it was 2009. So we moved in 2008. I believe you guys moved in 2007. And actually the first time we really connected was after the snowstorm or the blizzard, right? Where the power went out. So this is what happened. Our power went out. A lot of people who are old timers in New Hampshire know that that was the blizzard of 2008. Where we lived, our power was out for 10 days. Turns out we ended up going up to Bardo Farm, and they were like, what? The power's out? Because you guys live off the grid. So tell us your coming to America story. We'll start there. Coming to New Hampshire story.
Wow. Coming to New Hampshire.
So
yeah, sure. I mean, this is my version. Ian might have a different version. We read about the Free State Project in Reason magazine way back when, in the very beginning, and we didn't know all the details of signing the 20,000 signatures, nothing, but we thought, wow, the next time we're ready to go on an adventure, let's do that. Let's go to New Hampshire. And time passed, and who knew? It was still in the back of our heads, and then we met Neil and Emily Smith. Well, they weren't quite Neil and Emily Smith yet, but they weren't married yet. And we were living in Yardley, Pennsylvania at the time, and we started talking about, well, going on an adventure. They wanted to move to New England, skiing, big property, off-grid, creating, interestingly enough, some kind of alternative school.
oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that kernel was there from the start?
From the very start.
Wow.
And we took a trip and we went to Vermont, because Emily's from Vermont. And we looked around and we were like, this is not a good place to open a business. Not even going to consider it. But let's look at New Hampshire. And we did. And we found our dream property off-grid, already built. We were planning on building, the whole thing. And on the way home with our 2 dogs during a rainy 4th of July weekend, we all said, hey, let's do this.
Wow.
So we did.
And that was back in 2007, right?
Yeah.
So Ian, the farm is called Bardo. What does Bardo mean?
So Bardo is a Tibetan word, and it means between lives. So, and that was the original idea for it's not an alternative school, but when you die, if you're Tibetan, that's the time, between the time you die and the time you're born again, that's the time when you can make the most spiritual progress, because there's no demands on you. You don't have to pay the mortgage, you don't have to worry about, your children, your material stuff, the relationships, that's all behind you. You can actually advance in your understanding of things, and then you come back and play again. And so our idea was that we knew a lot of people through Neil and Emily who were, as they say, they're climbing the ladder and it's against the wrong wall. and they were in a position where, one of the things they could do would be just drop what they're doing, get rid of all their shit.
Can we say shit?
We can now. So no. Oh, you guys for real? Come on. It's the George Carlin rules.
So anyways, get rid of their stuff, get rid of their encumbrances, and start over. And our idea was we would help them figure out, well, what should you be doing with your life? And you get started with that, and the capitalist bent was, and then you go and you do that thing, and you pay us some percentage of what you make for a while. And that would fund the next people coming through. But so Bardo is a place where you're sort of stopped. You have no momentum.
Paused is how we talked about it,
you're
right?
Paused, you have no momentum. And so you can actually, it's sort of like you think of an oil tanker. If an oil tanker is moving and it wants to turn, that's a big effort. But if you actually bring it to the point where it's not moving, then it can turn any direction it wants and start. And so that was the idea.
And so it's sort of a pause in the sense that it's a launch pad,
That's
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so by way of background, just can you tell people, you're involved in so many things. So one of the ways that I know Jody is we served on the Free State Project Board together for many years. We have worked on so many projects that I probably won't even remember them all. I certainly, I buy my meat from Bardo Farm, but you're involved in education. You have a pile higher, deeper, which I never knew what that meant, but that is a PhD, and in education, right?
In education.
Okay, so tell folks back home just a little bit about your background, and then sort of what you're generally working on in New Hampshire, and then we'll start to deep dive into the actual ideas we have.
Sure. Right. So I do have a PhD in education, and in my day job, which is a full-time job on top of all the other projects I do, is I basically use technology. I design technology to be used for learning, so I mean, and that's the extent that leads to everything else going on here. But I've always been interested in education, and I guess schooling to some extent. So I've been on the Croydon School Board since 2010.
Wow.
I'm currently chair. I've been on and off as chair over the years. I am on the board for the School District Governance Association, and this is an organization that helps school board and budget committee members discover their lawful powers, what they're supposed to do, rather than what the New Hampshire School Boards Association tells them they're supposed to do, and they are very mixed and very different. What else do I do? I mean, those are my big ones,
right.
but that provides a lot of projects for me to work on.
Okay, and then Ian, just also to establish your credentials, you're like some fancy pants something too. I call you a NASA scientist. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration, or it might be entirely true.
No, I worked for NASA twice. The first time doing planetary geometry, it has to do with, you send a spacecraft someplace, and it takes a measurement, and it goes, oh, the magnetometer had this reading. And then you're like, okay, what does that mean? Where was I? Where was it pointed? What was going on? And so I helped planetary scientists figure that stuff out. The second time, I was the same place as Jody in the artificial intelligence research, where we're trying to basically teach computers to think, since it's clear that people aren't going to be able to do that. So it's helping to build Skynet in my own little way.
Oh, so it's all your fault.
Yes.
Right.
And so technically my master's is not in artificial intelligence, it's in learning sciences, because that particular place among AI really had to do with trying to figure out what it is that people are doing. So you could try to get a computer. In some ways it's experimental psychology, in that you look at what people do, you think you know what they're doing, you build a machine to do it, and then you see, does it do the same thing or does it do some other wacky thing? So you're actually testing out your ideas using computers.
Okay, and that was at NASA, but then also you're like a math,
right,
you
so
know.
for 20 years, I ran a site called Ask Dr. Math, and the idea there was...
That was ask with a K, because I see we're just dropping the swear bombs, so I just want to make sure. A-S-K, Dr. Math.
A-S-K, Dr. Math. And the idea behind Dr. Math was there's a bunch of people who want to have their questions answered, and anything from, kindergarteners trying to work things out with their parents to graduate students who are trying to prove something, or engineers who are trying to design something. And you have a lot of people out in the world who know a lot of math and love to explain things, and so we brought them together. It was totally volunteer. And so people would, except for me, I actually got paid to make sure it worked. But people would come in, ask questions. Volunteers would come in, our math doctors. They would come in, they would answer the questions. And what we were trying to do was, differently than other homework help sites, we were always trying to use the question as an opportunity to have a bigger discussion about math, or how a mathematician would look at something, or how this is a part of something else going on. So we're always trying to sort of get people to think beyond their question, and that made it unique and wonderful. And I mean, some of the stuff that's in there is just crazy.
And it was free for everybody to use.
It's free, yeah, it's a free service for the users, and the volunteers would just, it was amazing how many people would just be sitting up late at night answering questions just for the joy of helping people understand stuff,
Right, and the passion of it, because, I feel like education has been so politicized, right? And of course, that's something that always happens once you create special interests and you create funnels of money, and then you make people feel like they have to sort of protect their domains, and they have to really, clamp down. So a lot of the conversation I hear in New Hampshire is the sort of notion that anyone who's for school choice doesn't want children to learn. We're anti-education. We want to destroy the public schools. And so basically any hysterical term that you could imagine. But my point in having you guys introduce yourself is it's very important for people to know that we actually are thinkers. We think deeply about issues, and we don't just willy-nilly come up with some idea and be like, oh, let's just smash the system. It's usually like, well, the system isn't giving or delivering what was promised. And so how can we, instead of leaning into something that is a failure, how can we pivot with your boat example? How can we change direction and actually create things that have the positive outcomes we want, which I think all of us would agree is having kids who can think and who can read and write. Those seem important. So, because we're going to be doing 2 shows and we're going to have a little time, first I would like you, and both of you can do this, just to explain what happened in Croydon and sort of how the school choice, sort of school choice trajectory for folks back home who may not know.
Of course. So I don't remember the years, so I apologize for that, but it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So Croydon, the way schools work in New Hampshire, Croydon has a K-4 village school, and at the time I think it was just K-3. And we had a contract with neighboring Newport schools to send all our kids there, and the contract said we promised to send all our kids, and they promised to accept all our kids. And we looked at this was back in No Child Left Behind days, and this was a failing school district, not just a failing school. That meant multiple years where some vast majority of the kids were not doing anything at grade level. And so...
Can I interrupt you? I have a question. Whenever I see these proficiency scores and stuff, I'm genuinely curious. No, I'm
just
genuinely
going to take us off in a...
Well, I'm just genuinely curious. If you see something that says, okay, kids can only read at let's say 24% proficiency, is that true? Are we testing? Can I trust those? Or if a teacher says to me that's nonsense and really all the kids are leaving high school and they can read and write, is that true or no?
So neither is completely true, right?
All right.
But it's not. First of all, it's not that the average kid is at 24% proficiency. It would be, and the number that we keep saying is 40. It means only 40% actually can read if they're in 6th grade at 6th grade level, if they're at 8th grade at 8th grade level, and the other 60% can't.
Right? Okay.
So they haven't reached whatever that bar is. It doesn't tell you where are they. Maybe they can't read at all. Maybe they can barely decode. You just know that your average 10th grader should be able to read at this level, and 60% of them can't.
Okay.
It's interesting to note, too, that nobody understands what the proficiency is. Nobody knows what a NAEP score means. But what's interesting is those are the scores made up by the people who are doing the teaching, who said, this is how we should be judged. This is not the Cato Institute coming in.
Gotcha.
This is not us coming in saying, you're releasing idiots. This is them saying, this is what we think we should be doing, and we should be judged on this.
And that's fair, but that is still only one data point, and it is true that you have to look at kids individually.
It is.
But
it's a longitudinal data point. They've got stuff going back to the 70s in this, and that's the famous Cato graph where like nothing is improving by their own measures.
Since the 70s.
The way they asked to be judged, they have done nothing.
Okay. So, Croydon had, and this is, I mean, it's the cutest little school. This is literally like for folks who are like, New England. I mean, it is a little brick schoolhouse. And it's adorable. So, okay, K through 3.
It is It is the longest continuously running one-room schoolhouse in the country.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness!
I read that somewhere.
We should. Did I make that up in some newsletter once?
maybe that's where I get. No. I read it somewhere else.
We heard it somewhere.
Yes, I started that rumor. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, it is. And actually, that'd be a great title for an education documentary, which I hope we can make one day. So, to not interrupt you, so Newport has the failing school system, and the kids, so
we went to our town. I wasn't on the school board yet when this process started, but we polled people in town and said, do you want to continue sending your kids to a failing school district? And we gave them a few choices, and I was on the citizens committee actually at the time. Or would you like to have school choice? And those are the big options. You want to keep going there, and by a vote of something like 65 to 35%, they said school choice.
Okay.
So we listened to them, and we were able to get out of this area agreement. Oh my God! According to the RSAs, the laws in New Hampshire, in order to get, if you get into this area agreement, you can. It's a 10-year contract that.
After 10 years becomes perpetual.
Exactly. If you don't do anything about it.
Oh, wow.
So we started doing something about it, and one of the things that you had to do in order to get out of this contract is get permission from the
abusing spouse.
Thank you. I was going to say that, but I love this tag team here. And you needed permission from them, and we were lucky enough to have a superintendent in the Newport schools who was for school choice.
Wow.
And so she supported us, and her school board supported her. And we were able to get out. That took about 7 years from that day, from that first survey to yes, it was a long haul. That was just getting out of the area agreement. And then it was setting up school choice. So we did that. We interviewed schools all over the area, and we got lists of schools that people wanted in town, included Concord and Keene and Lebanon and just, all over the place. And we figured, well, if they work down there, they could take their kids there. So sure, we'll talk to them. And everybody at that time agreed to accept Croydon kids, that would be perfectly fine. And we'd get into what's called a tuitioning agreement with them. And so when that finally happened, we wrote our withdrawal plan that we had to submit to the state. We had to get approval we didn't actually have to get approval from the state. We just had to get feedback from them. And they, in the end, did not approve it. But one of the problems they had with our first draft was that we listed all the schools, and that included private schools and religious schools and like everything everybody asked for. And they said, you can't have religious schools, and private schools have to be approved. So we're like, sweet. So we went, and that's what we did. We said, fine, we'll remove the religious schools, and we started up with our school choice program, and Newport Montessori, which is a private school, was on our list of schools that parents could choose. 2 parents, 3 kids chose it the first year, and then the lawyer for Newport schools told the then commissioner of education, which was the one prior to Frank Edelblow, Virginia Barry, that, hey, Croydon's doing something illegal. They're not allowed to send their kids to private schools. And so they placed an injunction on us to take our kids out right in the middle of the school year.
I remember that. And then I mean, there was a court case.
That was the court case, so that's next.
Okay.
But right, they took us to court over it. They did not win the preliminary injunction. So, I mean, I first basically said, really? You don't care about the kids? You want to take them out in February in the middle of the year? Oh, you're right. We'll hold off until next year. Like, really? I mean, just so indicative of...
And that is kind of a tell, because one of the distinct things I remember from that court case was a prosecutor, or I forget, it may even have been the commissioner. Yeah, literally saying, like, we own your children, right?
Basically,
like,
they said some pretty crazy things.
They said things where I was just, I mean, we could go back and look at the blog posts. I can't remember the specific wording, but like literally where my jaw dropped, where I was like, wow, they're not even,
And the judge ruled in their favor.
Yeah.
With all of that.
Well, I mean, we do have an issue with the judiciary here, kind of supporting the status quo, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're not really looking out for the little guy.
Well, I mean, yes, and that is an issue. I mean, the thing, my big takeaway from this whole thing, just a small diversion, is when the court case was being heard, and I thought this was just a perfect example of the root of the problem with the judiciary. You had some of the language they were looking at said a school can choose from things, including but not limited to public schools and something. And the judge decided that the phrase including but not limited to X actually means limited to X, and that was in his opinion. After some other blather at the beginning talking about how you have to take the wording of the law seriously, and then he just totally turned it on his head. And this is the thing that it's one of my major issues, sticking points, is that you're in this situation where judges can just say that they're like Humpty Dumpty, right? The words mean what they want them to mean, and if you don't like it, tough.
And that's certainly a frustration, I think, for all of us over the past couple of years. Like, if you had to design a system to make a rational, logical person crazy, I think you would pretty much do what happened over the last 2 years. And, and I like to say this for folks back home too, is if you're not rational and logical, can we just, plainly state that the flip side is you're driven by emotion and you're irrational and illogical. So, that's a problem, because you can't actually order a society according to some things that don't make sense, because when you do, you start to create a society where people are pushing back and fighting back. We're probably going to have to, take some of this into part 2 of the show. But now we win the court case, right?
We actually lost the court case, and we made an appeal to the state Supreme Court. During that same time, I shepherded a bill through the legislature that allowed private schools in a town tuitioning program, and it turns out it was the law to allow that through the 1950s, and Vermont and Maine still have it. We're all 3 town tuitioning states, and so basically, and because of these ambiguous words in some of the law, we call this clarifying the law, because it said, but not limited to. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we actually got that bill passed and then pulled our appeal off the table because we didn't need it anymore. And so private schools are okay for town tuitioning programs. And I'll just add that last year, in 2021, another law got passed that allows religious schools. If you allow private schools in a town tuitioning program, you must allow religious schools as well. So now Croydon, of course, is the first town to use religious schools in our town tuitioning program.
And so town tuitioning is a little different and separate to the money follows the child, right? These EFA programs, or is it the same thing? Because
it is not EFAs at all.
Okay. So this is a separate thing. So we have about 4 minutes left for today, for this episode, and then we're going to go into part 2. We will cover everything that has to do with future-looking plans. So this is a little bit of just looking back, sort of the history of what school choice looks like, what you can do when you're an active person who feels passionately that whatever the system is and the way that is currently being done isn't satisfying the needs and the desires of the people paying the bill, which of course is the parents and the taxpayers. I loved what you said, where you said, you know, we talked to the parents and we asked people what they want. What an insane, novel notion to say that you might actually have customers here who are paying the bills, footing the bills, and you know what? If that customer actually wants to send their kid to a school that you personally don't approve of and the money is attached to the child, then it shouldn't be such a big deal. So with the town, so currently you have the town tuitioning program, so children, once they leave grade 4, can go to any school, or?
Pretty much. Grantham's the only one that said that they wouldn't take our kids, but they only go through 6th grade, so it doesn't really offer a lot. But yeah, we send kids to Sunapee, to Newport, to Lebanon, to Claremont. Yeah, and KUA, Kimberly Union Academy, that's one of the schools, very high price there, and we have a cap on the tuition that we'll pay, and parents have to pay anything additional to that.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. So I feel like that might be a good place for us to pause and to say that coming up in part 2 of this very special edition of the Underwoods from Bardo on the Carla Gericke Show, when we come back, we will talk a little bit about the charter school that I think you guys are thinking about starting, and Ian will maybe take a little bit of the opposite position. So we will get into the great debate about the future of charter schools in New Hampshire right after this. Thanks, guys.